Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. Welcome to the Frontline Innovators podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lake, and I'm really looking forward to today's episode. Today's guest excels in change management, technical and content writing, and teaching. He's a Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt and has several ProSci certifications. He's currently a strategic change administrator at Sunflower Electric Power Corporation. Please welcome John Ross. Hello, John.
Hello, Justin, and thank you.
Really excited to have you here on the show today, and looking forward to getting your story out to the rest of our audience. So let's start off as we always do and get your take on what you think is the biggest challenge facing the deskless workforce today.
I think that the biggest challenge facing the deskless workforce is really engagement. And our employees are so focused on their work that they have a task to do. That task is electricity on for our customer members. And so engaging them in change and also the right processes and projects is sometimes a little bit difficult. We're working diligently on this, and we have a number of task forces that are in place to really build relationships and reach out to employees.
So it's interesting. You talk about engagement right out of the gate, which I love. How do you define and measure engagement?
Well, this is a really interesting question because this is something that we struggle with. And I'll kind of hit the second part of the question first. In measuring engagement, we have biannual surveys that we do of all employees. We ask them questions about engagement and how they feel about leadership and their roles in the company in that. And so we have that data, but we're really planning on drilling down more into that to find out how are things going in terms of their psychological state, for instance, and how are they doing with how do they want to build their leadership skills. We have a project that we're enrolling in, and I think that this will be a multi-year project to build that engagement. In terms of defining engagement, one of the things that we see as essential to the company and its growth is building the confidence to have crucial conversations and to say to a manager or a project lead, I have some reservations about this, or I think that I have a better idea on how to do this. And those are the difficult things for us to do. We really want employees to speak up, but sometimes they're a little bit hesitant because they may be concerned that they're speaking in front of their peers, or maybe that their idea just isn't as good as they think that it is, or that they may receive from a manager or an executive. So this is an ongoing issue, and I think that I hope that we're going about this in the right way, really trying to stimulate kind of that trust-based culture throughout the company.
All right, this is a great start already, and I'm dying to explore a couple of the things that you just said, but I want to make sure that our audience understands who they're hearing from here before we get into some of the nitty gritty that I want to explore with you. So let's take a couple steps back and let the folks get to know you a little bit. Tell us how you ended up in the role that you're in today. What was some of your background? What led to you being involved in change management and organization like what you're at today?
Very good. I had joined Sunflower in July of 2015. And previous to that, I had worked for the university, and I was in the upper administrative areas of and after 25 years, I felt that I needed change, and I have a pretty strong technical background, and so seemed natural for me to reach out to Sunflower and see if there was a position. And I was hired as a business process specialist, really an emphasis on business administration skills and more on the process side, where work with SMEs and engineers and project leads on analyzing processes and mapping those processes. I was involved in really large corporate projects to map um, processes for an ERP project that we were doing. So I was baptized pretty quickly in a lot of different areas in the company. Um, I became interested in change management because of a suggestion by another one of my colleagues. She had suggested that I attend a conference in Florida put on by utility events. And she really pointing me towards the process side, but part of that conference also was change management. And I was completely new to the field and went there and listened pretty carefully to everything that I was hearing and was kind of texting back and forth with her that this is all new to me and what an interesting field this is. I brought that information back and really pushed within our department that, hey, I think we should take a look at this and become really more immersed in this because I think it'll do some good for the company. And after about probably 6 months of conversations, my immediate supervisor went to ProSci's change management certification class. And one of our executives and the senior manager of human resources and our organizational development manager went to ProSci's boot camp. Things were starting to roll a little bit, and a lot more interest in starting to generate with change management. Um, and at the same time, we were starting this migration from uh, Oracle EMS to Oracle Fusion. Major ERP project that involved 9 areas of the company. Our executives said, "Well, this would be a good demonstration project for change management, and we would like for you to lead that." I hadn't even attended change practitioner training yet, so that was doing that at the same time and putting together a plan for leading the project. We've been given some credit for the success of the project. Did a lot of assessments of the stakeholders and also had a lot of meetings and had lessons learned meetings so that how the project went. And in some cases, we're still building off of those results.
It's really interesting when you describe the change management journey that you and your company are on. It's not really that old of an initiative. Did I understand it correct? I mean, you joined only a handful of years ago and are now kind of building out this change management capability inside the organization. Am I understanding that right?
That's exactly right. I became a certified practitioner in 2019. And past year, 2021, we implemented and included our OCN project. So we have actually, working with ProSci, we've trained all of our employees on change management and I've conducted trainings across the company for project leads and then for managers and supervisors and management. And and the results have been good because now all of a sudden we have a consistent change vocabulary that we've built. We have employees talking to us and saying, I think we need change management on this. And so we're actually rolling out a new project called Sustain the Change. And this is really aimed at managers and supervisors and giving them the tools that they need to keep this going so that Sunflower can flourish. Our goal is that um, once I complete the advanced instructor certification, that I will be certifying staff within Sunflower and it will have certified practitioners in each major area of the company.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty rapid build out, but I think that it's working well.
I think you may be the first guest that we've had that's really talked about um, helping all members of the team to understand change. I love the expression of change vocabulary to get everybody on the same page about how you communicate and think about dealing with change inside the organization. Did that take a lot of pushing from the OCM team to really push for the broader education throughout the rest of the your company, or was that something that came down from the top?
Well, our executive team was just very supportive of that effort. And we had a 2-day training session for our executives where we brought ProSci master instructor in, talked with them. And so there was no problem with executives. They really wanted to do this. And when it came to budget and acquiring e-learning materials that each employee could have access to, they could do it on their own pace, their own time. Um, they were good with that. So we didn't have any trouble building a sponsor coalition. Um, I think that the employees were a little bit surprised by the effort because they'd heard about change management, they were familiar with the change cycle, but taking it down to the individual level and providing that training actually stimulated some questions about, well, why are we doing this? What's happening with the company, and those type of were really good because then we were able to explain, yes, change is happening all the time, and this is an industry that's full of change, and no, this is not a threat. What we're trying to do is to prepare you for whatever can happen in the utility industry.
Yeah, no, that's great. It really speaks to how change isn't something that just a couple of people do in an organization, but it has to be something that's embraced as part of the culture. And it's interesting. I just recorded another podcast earlier today, and we were talking about how change management in many organizations still requires a lot of advocacy. There still is a strong requirement to really encourage or explain the value proposition of change. But when it comes down from the top, and there's just a culture of support for change, strategic change, and not just receiving it, but actually being very deliberate about how you approach that, it can then take the framework that comes from ProSci and other things like that to be that much more productive, or so it would seem.
Well, I think so. And, just back up a little bit. Sunflower is spread out geographically across the western thirds of Kansas. And we have offices in Wichita and Kansas City, as well as a major generation facility in Southwest Kansas. Offices there, and then another office in Central Kansas, and then corporate office in Hayes. So there are a number of cultures present, and talking to them about a unified culture, and them being the employees, is pretty significant because they all have their own ways of doing things, own uh, cultural memory, and their own viewpoints. And so when we talk about change management, managing culture is one of those key ingredients.
It's fantastic. Well, one thing I'd like to explore a little bit in an organization like yours that has such a large frontline workforce, do you think that there are differences in the way that change should be handled with frontline workers versus those who are in more traditional corporate jobs working at a desk?
Well, this is actually something that we've talked a lot about internally, because it's easy for me and anyone else in the corporate side to look at it through a corporate lens. So we're very aware that we need to bring in the supervisors first and talk to them about why we're doing the change. And this is something that we learned with the Oracle project. Our supervisors wanted to know about the change before, and what was happening with the technology before all employees did, so that they could be a resource. And that shouldn't have been earth shaking for us, but it actually was, because it was a different way of viewing things. And so with that geographically spread workforce and a workforce very technical and out in the field, this was a crucial move for us. I think that the other part of it is that, for lack of a better term, change has to make sense. And our line employees, for instance, work with uh, probably everything that they do has to make sense to them. And so, if it's something that just for them, this is technology that they don't see the benefit of it, and they're not realizing the benefits, they're going to question, why are we doing it?
Well, that's a pretty common theme on our show, right? Which is really thinking about how to articulate what's in it for them. And they are often left out of a lot of the conversations planning phase that led to the deployment of this new technology. And so if they are just on the receiving end of that change without any preparation, it's hard for them, certainly on their own, to figure out what's in it for them, because mostly their perception is likely to be negative, that they have to change for the sake of changing. So how have you handled, communicating the the part of what's in it for them to really help get them engaged? Have you found any secret or special methods there?
Well, I wish that I could say yes. I'm going to talk about one specific event where we were talking to a group of employees about the Oracle project, and we went the direction of what's in it for me. And we were talking about the value of the project and cybersecurity and all those. And a lady in the audience just interjected and said, "We have to do this. So why are you worried about what's in it for us? Why are you telling us about the value?" And that was one of those moments where you kind of like sit back and go, "Whoa!" And so then we started talking more about, well, what's required of me, along with what's in it for me. And we certainly didn't want to say, well, your job depends on this, because I mean that's a little bit threatening. But at the same time, we wanted to put this in a framework of, this is good for the company. Security is essential for us in utility, and you can have a big role in this by looking at the benefits of this project. It can't say that it was an easy sale, because we are steeped in cybersecurity. So they're saying, well, here you are again, cybersecurity. But that was something that we worked with, and we also talked about the ease of use, and the way that the system be interoperable, so that as purchasing work with say contracts and with requisitions, that accounts payable was brought into that as well, and legal. So wasn't an easy sale by any means.
The woman that made the comment in your group session that you were describing before, I mean, that's a pretty interesting point, right? Which is, or I can maybe take a different point away from the words that she said, which is, sometimes I think when we're deploying technology to frontline workers, we're just trying to get them to accept that they have to do this, right? But to the point you were making, we want more than just, we want for more than you to just acquiesce and just agree to do something that makes you miserable. That's actually not what we're trying to do. We actually want to help you find the path to enjoy and appreciate this. And the difference between the two is like a minimum viable or minimum amount of engagement versus maximum amount of engagement. Right. And the only way that we can get there is to really help them understand what is in it for them and how it's going to make their job better, and how it's not going to eliminate their job or that of their colleague, and things like that. Right. Some of the genuine causes of anxiety when we're rolling out new technology.
Well, yes, and um, I think that one of the keys there is not to overpromise on the what's in it, because in some instances, some departments receive more work, and other departments receive less work because processes changed. And we're still encountering that and still working with that, because uh, generally human nature is, well, wait a minute, now all of a sudden I'm doing their work. Why is that? So this is a very key point that we don't overpromise and say, well, it's going to make the job easier. It doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and that just speaks to another thing that it seems to be becoming a common theme lately is just the importance and the value of transparency in how we communicate. So you're right. You raise a really good point because there actually could be some things that to that individual actually increase the workload. We may be trying to track more information about assets, so they have more data entry in this case now. So we're adding new capabilities, and there's a lot of wonderful things that come from it. But it may actually have a negative impact. It may cause a work order to take more time to be processed instead of less. But there's a reason why those things are happening, and so maybe another thing to think about is that what's in it for you is not necessarily all that matters here, but what's in it for the rest of the organization and for your colleagues and for the customer and for the safety, of the infrastructure and everything else.
Yeah, I think so. And um, one of the things that we read into the question too is that maybe we needed to build up that trust level and not use kind of the accepted terms of, well, we want to use best practices and we want to add realization. Needed to really break that down into pieces that made sense to that individual. So that was a challenge for us.
Yeah. Are there any things that you've experimented with or put forth where you would look back and say you'd never do it again? Where or is an approach to get folks on board with the technology or the overall change, and just it didn't go quite as planned?
I think that again, kind of looking at this Oracle project, um, we talked about the broad benefit of cybersecurity that didn't resonate very well across the company. And so, uh, yes, yes, cybersecurity is really important for us, but we really needed to break that down into the why that it's important, and also to look more at their process and if they were getting value there. That was something that we didn't do well. The other thing that we learned from that particular project was the importance of manager and supervisor in that chain of command, and really teaching them and working with them to make sure that they understood the change because sometimes they didn't. So the messaging, our lessons learned from that was that messaging to that supervisor and manager is just extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Or when you are looking, I know there is a lot of process and a framework that comes out of ProSci about how to implement change in an organization like yours. Are there tools, technology tools that you use as enablers? And I guess that could mean anything from using Teams video conferencing or Zoom or whatever, up to any other specialized tools that you have found to be helpful in your change management endeavors.
I'll speak to a different project here, and we use the AdCard dashboard a lot in this project. This involves asset management and more specifically um, line inspections. To give some background to this, when I studied the process they were using to inspect lines, we found out that technicians were actually using printed spreadsheet and they would do the line inspection and add this printed spreadsheet, check off what they were doing, bring it back. Someone else would do the data entry from that spreadsheet, upload it into a database, and then um, sometimes the data would never be seen again. And so there was no trend analysis or anything going on. And so the project that we were looking at was using robotic process automation, building that internally, and then using hardened tablets to give the technician, they would have the script in front of them and they could do this out of without using all spreadsheets. This was a project that had been talked about for probably 8 years and had and really batted back and forth about the merits of it. There was a lot of discussion about using a third-party vendor, and there was not, our technicians were interested in that, but our leadership was not. And so we had this internal solution using the RPAs. Now, we felt, we being myself and the project, that we had immediate employee buy-in. Felt that the technicians had wanted this for such a long time that awareness and desire were just a slam dunk. And we used the AdCar dashboard, and we used 20 questions, talked about awareness and desire, and knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Sent that out to not only the tech, but also areas. And we found out that awareness and desire was not where we thought that it should. In fact, it was really lacking. And when we pulled managers together and worked through the results of the survey, I actually heard one manager say, "Who did this survey? Who responded to this?" I said, "You and your employees." Because the results were that they had no confidence in the ability of the company to support the project. And they were very concerned about where they would get support, and that it was an undeveloped software solution. Um, they just felt that we were going down a path that's not the right way. And again, when I say they, I'm talking about technicians and managers and supervisors. So it was a larger group. Now, to the project lead's credit, he took those survey results, called everyone together, and he says, "Tell me what's going on." And really kind of a 2-hour meeting where they talked about, what their fears were, and why they were resisting the project, because there was resistance. And we, Mark and I, Mark is the project lead. We had talked a lot about how we would handle resistance, how we could build the employees into the solution. And that was the exact thing that he did. Talk to them about, how do you think we should do this? And how do you want the technology to work? And so we managed to really kind of calm that resistance down slightly. And I can't give him enough credit, because a change manager is facilitating things. It's really the project lead that's doing the work. And so that also changed the way that we communicated about the project, because we started talking about the value of using those RPA, how they could connect to Sunflower's software, how it would free them up from doing a lot of work. We also found out that our view of training was really incorrect, just based on that AdCar dashboard and a lot of different things for us. And we found out that we had assumed that they were okay with using, and the reality was that they didn't know how to use it.
You just broke up a little bit, and I just want to go back to what you said. You said that you assumed that they were comfortable using tablet PCs. Is that what you said?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Our major assumption was, hey, we'll give these guys these tablet PCs, and they're going to be overjoyed to get these and take them out in the field, and voila, we have a project going. And in reality, they didn't know how to use them. They didn't know how to use Windows. And so all of a sudden, our training took kind of a 90-degree turn on, and instructing people how to use the basics of the. And so we have two assumptions there. One, that there was no resistance to the project, and the other assumption, they knew how to use the technology, and have them both.
Those are two big barriers to success had they gone unnoticed.
Yeah. And so just those realizations really allowed us to gain pretty good ground conditions. There was another assumption that is kind of interesting for us, because, of course, with the ProSci approach, we come back and we ask about ability and reinforcement. I'm circling back, talking to Mark and saying, how's everyone doing? Do we need to bring them together and talk about this? Oh, they're doing great. They're using it. A week later, we get back together and it says, you know what? They're not using their software. They've gone back to the old way of doing it because that's what they're comfortable with. And talked to them and he says, no, we're working on the ability and reinforcement side to make sure we're actually using it. So in that project, it had three major assumptions that took us the wrong direction.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Well, it was really good for you to have really taken the time to query the team and to come back and really understand what you were faced with. Because had you gone into that scenario just depending on your assumptions, it could have been a much worse outcome.
Now we had no idea that there was a lack of buy-in at the very uh, opening stages of the project. And I think that the lesson for us was that we had talked about this project for so long that technicians just decided, hey, it's not going to happen. And even when it does, you're not going to do it right. Human nature. So we had to overcome it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, what is a myth about change management that you think propagates inside your organization or elsewhere that you'd like to break up and clear up?
Um, Once we had success with change management, over and over and over from executives and managers, we need to put change management on these. And like most companies, we have a pretty limited change management staff. And so stamping change management on this to make sure that it um, crossed off that box is not the right approach. And also that there's an assumption that, hey, we're going to follow an ad card by step. And and one of the myths that's a myth for us because not all projects need a cookie cutter approach. I think it's obvious, but in some cases, when I talk to project leads and to stakeholders, we find out that awareness is pretty good and the desire is there. And then maybe we need to emphasize knowledge a little bit. So very careful now about, okay, we need to put change management on this. We're asking why question. Why do we need it? What's our objective? Um, how does it fit within the company's objectives and what are the benefits that we're seeing in that project?
Yeah. What would you say is the contribution to your organization and the change management culture that you personally are most proud of?
I think that the having a consistent view of change management has really increased across the corporation. I think that the employees now see this as a positive rather than something added onto their plate, and that they're willing to integrate it. There's a couple of instances that come to mind that really kind of fortify that, and that the last training session that I did for our transmission uh, operations area, technicians are actually joining that training section from in and asking questions that were exactly the right question to ask about how change is impacting them and what they needed. Um, that level of interest where they're able to say work from their pickup using a laptop, the employees gathered around it and participating in the training and responding. I said it's a golden moment. Um, that tells me that we're reaching out in the way that we should.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty powerful to see, especially when you have a workforce that may have started off reluctant, and when you see them come around, this has come up a few times on the podcast to see the men and women come around and to really embrace what we've all been working so hard to get out to the field and have them now become champions for this innovation or this change that they're experiencing is such a rewarding experience. So I think that's a really great example that you share.
Yeah, I think so. And then as we're talking about rolling out this project and certifying employees within the company, there's more enthusiasm for that than I thought there might be. Because this is a chunk of their time, and they're certainly wanting to apply their time on the job, but they're really um, quite dedicated to change management, and they know that it could be a positive.
Yeah, I really hope the folks in our audience are listening. I hope they're picking up on the same thing that I am. We've now done probably 30 or so of these episodes of Frontline Innovators where, we're focusing a lot on change management practices and the practitioners that are helping to enable that. And I can honestly say I've talked I've heard some examples of change management being incorporated in the overall culture, but I don't recall a scenario where it was as deep as what you're describing to the extent that you've really, trained all your folks on the concept. I realize everybody's not ProSci certified as a result of that, but that they have now acclimated as an entire organization. And I'm sure there was an uphill battle in the beginning, an investment of time and mind share to get everybody on the same page, but it really just seems like it would smooth out so many of your transformational initiatives down the road when you've got everybody rowing in the same direction.
I think that it has. And there was another event that we had last year that I really helped propel things along too. And we had a ProSci strategic alignment meeting with our staff. And we had a ProSci master instructor, a 2 day strategic alignment meeting, and we involved everyone. There was a limitation on the number that we could have in this, but we wanted involvement from every area of the company. So rather than just limiting this meeting to executives, we went for middle managers and had them involved in thinking about here's the company's strategy, and here's how change interacts with that, and here's the intersection process, strategy, and change. And and then we were gathering their feedback and benchmarking that. We come back to that once a year to make sure that it's on track. We're not inviting ProSci in once a year, but we're same techniques, bringing the same people together and really kind of making sure that we're on track with a strategic view of what.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Well, it sounds like you've made a pretty big investment, not just in dollars with the investment of some ProSci, consulting and training and things like that, but also just the investment of time from, all levels of leadership in the organization. And it sounds like you're reaping the rewards of that. We're coming up toward the end here already, but I'm curious if you could offer one piece of advice to another organization that may be earlier in their journey on organizational change management, what would that be?
Well, surprisingly, this is something that I've just been reminded of, in that I have to be proactive, talking to project leads and, and managers and supervisors about building change management. If I sit back and wait for them to come to me, chances are they won't. And even though we have feedback from them that says I want to learn more about change management, I have to be really reaching out to them and allowing them to know that, hey, I'm right here for you, and ready to work with you, and how can I help you. Um, and again, if I sit back and wait, I'll just be sitting there waiting.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting for you to say. After we just really talked about how well indoctrinated everybody in the organization is about change management, but old habits die hard, and these project leads that are used to doing things in a particular way, I mean, we're trying to change how they think about change. And so they're not just going to flip a switch overnight, and they're not used to pulling in you and your team into those types of conversations. And so I can see we've got to help get them out of that rut. Even if they're generally positive and supportive of it, they still have habits that need to be changed.
Yeah, and I think that the second part of this is that I have to have, I guess, the courage to say to them, I don't think your project is quite ready yet. Let's look at your schedule and back a little bit because there's things that we need to do from a change perspective. Make sure that your stakeholders and for a project lead, that's a kind of a bitter swallow because you've done all this work on your schedule, and then you have this guy saying, "Hey, let's slow down."
It's tough, but I agree with the point that you're making, which is that if we don't do the proper preparation and we just hold to the date as the highest priority item on the project plan, that's a recipe for failure. I mean, I can't even count the number of times that I've seen that throughout my career where a team was motivated more by meeting the deadline than actually by all the other success criteria in the overall project charter. And it's not to say that we should be lax about target dates. I'm not saying that at all. But if we recognize that we have a readiness issue with the people that are going to be affected by this, the last thing in the world that we ought to do is go jam it down their throats anyway, because we're only setting ourselves up for more cost complexity and lower engagement in the long run. We're actually defeating the very purpose that we're trying to drive toward.
So, and I think that you've been in this profession long enough to know that every project that doesn't go well has a ghost. Those ghosts will come back to lunch you over and over again. We're really aware of the impact that change management has on the project as well as
Yeah. Well, John, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. It's been good getting to know you on both our prep call and in today's conversation. I think the audience is going to benefit a lot from what you shared. I'm really fascinated with the level of embrace that your organization's had about organizational change management overall, and just some of the tactics and strategies that you shared with us today. So, thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, Justin. This is just a great opportunity. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Well, after today, we're going to extend an invite to include you in the Frontline Innovators Council, which is a private group that we have on LinkedIn, where all former Frontline Innovators guests convene on social media in a private forum where we can swap stories and do a little bit of networking inside there. So after today's episode, you will get an invite to come and join us on LinkedIn. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going there.
I really look forward to that.
Excellent. All right. Well, folks, we need to wrap it up there. I hope you found this conversation as enjoyable as I have. And if so, as you know, we ask this every time in every episode. Please go out and share and rate the podcast. 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you that are innovating on the front lines. And don't forget, this podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. Visit the website at skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. And if you or someone you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear about it. We're always looking for more guests for Frontline Innovators to come and share their stories. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know who they are or tell me about your story, and we'll be sure to get you scheduled for another episode of Frontline Innovators. John, thanks again for your time today.